My name is Optimus Prime. We are autonomous robotic organisms, but you can call us Autobots.
I say we take off and nuke the entire site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
I want you to rest well, and a month from now, this Hollywood picture is gonna give you what you want. I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Inside Your Screen Bite-Sized Podcast. In this podcast, we'll be looking at Killing Eve, the series, as the episodes come out. Myself and my fellow host, Brendan Horgan, will be discussing Villanelle, the super assassin with a bit of sass, and Eve, played by Sandra Oh. Brendan, how are you doing, sir?
Yeah, very good, Tony. How are you?
I'm not too bad. So basically, just wanted to get your overall thoughts on episode 2. We do like an overall kind of prediction of what you kind of thought, and then we can get into the nitty gritty pieces.
Okay, so controversially, it's almost like my opinion of this week's episode kind of mirrors your opinion of episode 1. This wasn't my favourite episode. I wasn't overly impressed by it. I thought it was a good episode, but I thought an awful lot of it was filler. Anybody who's listened to our first episode review kind of would have heard my hopes for episode 2, and I was really hoping, again, I'm slightly going into details here, but I was really hoping they didn't do a time jump from episode 1. Which they did. They did a time jump.
Well, slightly.
No, massively. They didn't. I was expecting this episode to pick up where the last episode ended, but they didn't. They've obviously gone maybe a week or 2 weeks ahead in the time frame. So I wasn't happy about that. There was chunks of this episode that I just filler. It seemed really to drag at stages, and the story didn't really develop. The easiest way of putting it was I enjoyed the episode, but I thought that they spent the entire episode kind of built to a couple of small
poignant scenes.
The story didn't move forward enough for me in an entire episode. There was.
Well, I think this is my. I was just about to say, I think this is basically my sort of apprehensions of the first episode. I think have become more compounded in the second episode. That you have to realize there's only 8 episodes of series 3, and when you have a series that has less than like 10 episodes, every episode needs to count. And I think in the first episode I had a kind of like knee-jerk reaction. I've had a bit more time now to kind of sort of absorb what was going on, and this particular episode as well, even though we're introduced to a few new characters, I agree with you. I think that the pacing is something completely different than what we've experienced before with Killing Eve. And I think at the end of the day, is Killing Eve losing its touch, Brendan?
On this episode, I was pleasantly surprised by episode 1, and I was slightly disappointed by episode 2, which is probably the easiest way of putting it. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just the development of the characters. I don't know what it was about this second episode, but it just didn't move the story a lot. Like you said, you've got 8 episodes to compact a series, so you really need your episodes to be punchy and move the story along. And it didn't move the story along enough for me. Let's go into the details then, and I won't go into majors like specific details, but where it didn't move the story along enough for me was this episode. Basically, the entire episode, all we really established was Eve now knows that Villanelle is alive.
Yep.
Villanelle now knows that Eve is alive.
Yep.
Carolyn is kind of grieving her son in a strange way. And there obviously is a plan in place, and like you can kind of tell where this is going, where Carolyn and it looks like Eve and the kind of website team, that the company that Kenny were working for, it looks like they're going to go into they're going to go into business for themselves. They're going to kind of start investigating what happened to Kenny kind of off the books. There wasn't enough in it for me. It didn't move it far along forward enough. It just didn't. That's all we really established. We kind of knew that was going to happen anyway. From episode 1, we knew Kenny was dead. We kind of had our predictions about what would happen with Carolyn, and we thought they'd go underground, and they've only just kind of, this entire episode should have ended with, the team's up and going and they're working off the grid, and, Eve's now back working with Carolyn, and they're working with the Bitter Pill magazine to kind of help them with their investigation, and it should have all started. I don't know, maybe the end of the episode would have been nice and punchy if it was like, they've
I think
the team, let's go and get Kenny's killer. But it just didn't. It was just kind of like, it plodded along.
This is what I think this episode was for. Obviously, we start with Kenny's funeral, which kind of got a bit of a thumbs down from me because of the fact that, Kenny's been in all the series so far, and his death at the end of episode 1, for me, was just used as a kind of shock tactic. Now, I always kind of despair when shows go into like maybe the 3rd or the 4th, even the 5th series, and they start relying on shock tactics to actually propel the narrative forward rather than using the kind of characters. And this is my kind of overall point, I think. If you look back at the first 2 series, Eve in series 1 was witty. She was, she had an acute mind, being able to kind of spot Villanelle in the beginning. She kind of hunted. She was a bureaucrat, but she also hunted serial killers. That was the kind of part of the job, sort of thing. Now in series 2, she sort of, the kind of message was, in series 1 she was chasing Villanelle. That there was the tension, there was the kind of whole chase sequence, of her trying to catch Villanelle. In series 2, the kind of the proposal was, is Eve like Villanelle? And the kind of whole thing at the end of that was, well, no, she's not. Are they in love? Well, or is she just really addicted to the kind of danger element of things? We don't, that was kind of answered in series 2. And now we've got series 3 where she's just basically plodding along with nothing to do. Yeah, okay, the death of Kenny may have energized her to kind of, try and find his killer. And she kind of does that in a kind of way with his phone going to see the Bitter Pill people. And that, I think this episode is more just introducing the new characters. So you've got Carolyn's daughter, Geraldine, who's Kenny's sister, who came out has never been mentioned before. And that's another kind of alarm bell for me. Whenever you get characters, it almost becomes like a kind of soap opera where the brother of the long dead person comes along and everything like that. So that's a bit worrying. And then you also got Jamie, who is the editor of Bitter Pill. Now I think these are going to be 2 figures that are going to be quite prominent in later episodes. But I think this whole episode really was to kind of, show Caroline's grief, like that moment, that quiet moment that she has in the car, like eating her sandwiches. And you can see her she's welling up, but she's not crying because she's got that whole stiff upper lip thing going on. And that's great. I think her character has really shone through in the series so far, which now makes me think as well that she'll probably die before the end of this series. But there were certain little poignant moments in this episode. There were certain little nuances. But overall, I agree with you. I think the kind of pacing of everything has just kind of really slowed down. And it kind of reminds me, I don't know if you saw Picard, the kind of Amazon Star Trek series. I watched that, and it was the same kind of thing. It was just a lot of filler, no killer. There's a lot of kind of things, just people doing stuff just to get from point A to point B. But in between that, the kind of magic from the first 2 series is gone. And I think the main thing of that is Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who was the original writer for the first series, kind of gave up the mantle in the second series. But I think now it's really showing through that they're kind of falling back on kind of formulaic tropes from the first 2 series. And we're kind of sitting there, the audience is sitting there just going, well, we've seen all this kind of stuff before. Bring me something new.
Yeah. One thing I thought was disappointing with this episode as well was Villanelle. Her kind of story arc in this episode was minimal. They introduced her training this new young assassin. But other than that, I can't really think of anything.
But that's the thing, we've also seen it before.
Yeah. I mean,
I think it was in series 1 where she gets like the 2 other agents or whatever, or the 2 other sort of assassins, and they have to go on a job together, and she basically kills them. So as soon as the new Felix, or was his name Felix?
Felix.
As soon as he kind of appears, it's like that she's going to kill him before and the whole kind of their mission where they're dressed up as clowns. I wanted to see more of the clowns. I want to see more of that kind of microcosm of what Villanelle is like when she's in character of a different character. If that makes sense. I wanted to see her.
Yeah, there wasn't much of her. Like, I'm just thinking now, in the entire episode, okay, we saw a couple of scenes with Dasha, who I have to be honest, I'm really liking this Dasha character. She's a character. She's very interesting. She makes me like, she's quite a humorous character as well. But we had a kind of
80s mum thing going on, like the kind of whole visor and sort of 80s sport jackets, and
just her fashion sense is really funny to watch. She's she's always got the fag hanging out of her mouth. She's always smoking. And she seems like an entertaining character. But for Villanelle in this one, it was just, I don't know what she did. So she had that kind of, you've got a job. The scene with Dasha, we've got another job for you. We need you to train someone. They kind of have a real brief scene at a bus stop with the guy. Then they go straight into the scene with the clowns where they kind of do the assassination. And that's really it. They have the scene with Constantine. So Constantine is now, what is Constantine up to? He's still with the 12. And we need to correct that. We called them the 11 in our first episode review.
Did we? I thought we called them 12.
But listen, we were only one number away.
Okay.
So that's all that matters.
it's only one number away.
Constantine is now back with the 12, and he kind of shows up with Villanelle, kind of turns up at her house and tells Villanelle that Eve is alive. That's really it. Like, for Villanelle, it really was complete filler, the whole episode. Like you said, the introduction of Felix is almost a repetition of something that we've seen in previous seasons. The Dasha character and the relationship with her is almost mirroring the kind of, or a mother relationship compared to what she has with Constantine, which is a kind of father relationship. So for Villanelle, who you could argue is pretty much the main character in it, or one of the 2 main characters, there wasn't much of her, and what was in there wasn't great.
Yeah, I mean, she's been falling into a pattern since kind of series 2, where she meets someone, like in season 2, she did it with the boy in the hospital, Gabriel, where she learned she's annoyed by him at first, begrudgingly learn some details about his life. You kind of think, things that make him vulnerable. And then it's the same thing with Felix. Like, they're just following the same kind of plot points. And then, just as you're about to think...
No, go ahead, Tony, sorry.
No, I was just about saying, just when you kind of think that there's like a kind of bond, a relationship going there, she kills them. So I think that's maybe what's going to happen with Dasha. I think we're going to sort of learn to kind of like her, really like as a character, and then she'll be kind of snipped away. But what was your question? Sorry.
What did you think of the whole Constantine kind of? Obviously, he's kind of admitted he's part of the 12, and he put the tracker, didn't he, on Carol?
The bug in the
Carolyn's daughter. So he's obviously kind of bugging them for whatever reason that may be. What did you think of?
Here's what I think. So Constantine, I've always liked Constantine's character. I was a bit disappointed with his and Villanelle's reunion at the end, because obviously in season 2, he chose his family over her. And what we know about Villanelle is, like, when you kind of betray her, like that's the end of you. Like, you're never going to see the light of day again. So just to have her sort of throw a few things at him and then sort of immediately go back into their kind of almost parental, childlike relationship where, Villanelle, and let's be honest, Villanelle is a child, really. She has outbursts when, she's not really meant to. Like, even in this episode where she's been given the role, or she wants to be a keeper, I think it's called, where she wants to sort of promote herself to middle management, and she has to show restraint and she has to show patience, and she clearly is not a person who can do that, and that's just shown when she kills Felix. Then you have Constantine, who you can always, there was always like a knife-edged sort of tension between their relationship. You always kind of got the fact that he always had like a hand in his pocket with like a syringe or a gun ready for her to kick off if that needed to be. I hope they continue with that. But what I think's happening now is with the introduction of Jamie, the editor, who was given a lot more screen time than I thought. So that's making me think that he's going to be a prominent figure, if not the person who threw Kenny off the building. I think he may be a kind of a mole for the Russians or for MI6 or something. I think he's more than what he says he is.
Okay.
Because when we first see him, he's outside the pub and he observes that, Eve has been talking to herself. So he's very observant, which makes me think that he has a larger role to play in all of this. And then you get introduced to Geraldine, the sister who we've never heard of before, who seems like I think she might be involved somehow as well. This might be tinfoil hat moment here. But she's been given this kind of character trope of like, oh, mum, you're not really going through the emotions. I'm really emotional and everything like this. And it kind of makes me think she could be like a red herring. I think.
Do you know what? I have a theory.
Suddenly come out from the, go.
I have a theory on why she was introduced. I've had a kind of slight theory for a while in regards to Constantine. And this is a prediction. I have a feeling that Kenny and, is it Geraldine? Mm-hmm. Might be Constantine's kids. I've seen hints through, and this is even before the current series. There was hints with Kenny in previous interactions with Constantine. I think in the second series there was an episode where Constantine was staying at Carolyn's house, and Carolyn had other partners kind of coming around, and you had the dynamic with Kenny there. But it was almost as if there's been a few subtle hints that I've noticed that might suggest that Constantine is is the father of them both. They never mention Carolyn, their dads. And there was a slight, in this episode as an example, I already had that feeling anyway, before they introduced the sister Geraldine, that Constantine might be Kenny's dad. And now Geraldine, because there's also the scene where they meet, and he kind of gives her the magnet, the fridge magnet, which he's got the tracker on or the recording device on. He actually makes a point of kind of saying, my daughter really likes fridge magnets. That's how he kind of almost starts the conversation. He's looking at the fridge magnet and he says, my daughter really likes fridge magnets. And they kind of make a point of her saying, yeah, I really like fridge magnets. I forget what the line was, but there's a line where she basically says, I collect fridge magnets. And then he's kind of you'd probably appreciate it more then. And it's almost, there's a slight hint there that he's actually talking about her. We know that scene, Constantine has set that interaction up anyway because he's got a recording device on the magnet. But that's a little kind of, I have a feeling that might be a twist, that Constantine is actually there. Well,
and even at the beginning as well, like she kind of mentions that, oh, I remember you kind of told me how to speak Russian, like swear words in Russian, and you were the monster slayer and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I don't know what's going to be red herrings and what's not. I don't know what's going to be, I think we should make notes. We should make notes of what our predictions are and whether they come true or not, and then do like some kind of, I don't know, on air sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Consequences. Yeah. Like we'll take a shot, something like that. But so give me 3 good things that you thought about this episode and 3 bad things, Brendan, and then we'll kind of wrap it up for this episode.
Okay, 3 good things about this episode. I would say Carolyn's performance. I forget the actress's name.
Fiona Shaw.
A fantastic performance in this episode. I really liked. I think she's just a fantastic actress. I think that would be the main plus point of that. I did like the new character. His name, the bitter pill editor, the guy
like Jeremy.
I really liked the introduction of his character. Quite humorous, quite interesting. Like you said, there's kind of, it seems like there's something kind of in the background or something we're unaware of about him. But I quite enjoyed his character, and I thought the script for him, his dialogue was really good. There was moments that he made me laugh. Now, third, good point. Now I'm struggling a little bit. I'm struggling. It's probably.
Well, you can just have two. You don't have to do three.
Okay, I'll make it easy for the bad points. The bad points were I didn't like the fact that they jumped ahead in time from episode 2 to episode 1. I think that's flawed. I mean, that if we're going on the basis that Kenny was thrown off the top of the building, Eve was at the bottom of the building and is there, by all accounts, the only way out of the building. So how did these guys get out of the building without Eve knowing?
You wanted it to kind of pick up as soon as it ended.
100%.
You wanted
100%. But they're going along the storyline of did he jump or was he pushed? But kind of for me that's a bit of a stupid way for the script to go, because I think we all know he wasn't pushed and that he was thrown off the top of the roof. Yeah. Second thing I didn't like was the pacing. Like you said, I think there was too much filler and too much of non-movement of the story. I don't think the storyline progressed enough throughout the whole episode for all the characters. And the third thing I didn't like was there just wasn't enough Villanelle.
Well, I mean, I agree with you on those ones. I like the little nuances on this episode. So, like when Carolyn's refusing to acknowledge that she's misbuttoned her shirt, for example, when she's going in for a meeting, and the kind of whole interruptions between her character and Steve Pemberton's character. I thought little things like that were very much in the kind of vein of the kind of Killing Eve sort of comedy in that respect, the kind of like dark comedy of that. I also liked the fact that we kind of, this is my hope now. I hope that we've kind of got over the plodding part of it. I hope we can get more into the kind of the nitty gritty of everything. But I agree with you with everything. The pacing has been so far since episode 1 atrocious, and I think there's just something missing of a whole, like the whole that special magic thing that made series 1 really good. And I hope that they in the upcoming episodes find it, and they find it quick, because I don't want the end of this to be either Eve or Villanelle once again lying in a pool of their own blood, but coming back for series 4. I want some finality in between us, because as I said, the whole thing about their relationship has always been like a cat and mouse chase. In the first series, it was Eve chasing Villanelle. In the second series, it was them kind of teaming up to a certain degree. Where can they go from here now? So yeah, I hope to be surprised.
Yeah, the third episode, they really need to get to the point pretty fast. Like, as I think we've established, and I think it's quite predictable that they're going to be investigating Kenny's death. Part of I keep on forgetting the name of the company,
Bitter Pill.
The Bitter Pill guys are going to team up with Carolyn, with Eve, and with whoever they can get to help them. And they're going to be investigating Kenny's death off the books, right? If that isn't established in the first 10, 15 minutes of the next episode, they'll be
hell to pay.
No, it's so, you can't, I'm going to use Game of Thrones, the final season, as an example, right? But you can't spread something out and really kind of drag something along and then try and stuff an entire series worth of content into your last 4 episodes, where we just we've set a slow pace to start with, but now we need the action to kick off. So the last 4 episodes are going to be non-stop, move too fast, don't cover the gaps. That I hope they're not. I hope that isn't the way it goes.
Okay, well, check us out next week when we discuss episode 3. I think the title was called Carpool Karaoke or something like that along the lines. This was called Management Sucks or something along those lines. But yeah, you can check us out at Inside Your Screen. We're on Twitter at Inside Your Screen with a UR, because we're streets, we're grands. You can also check us out on YouTube at Inside Your Screen. And we'll be here discussing this next week, episode 3. Hopefully it'll get better. Let's wait and see.
Killing Eve, killing Eve, killing Eve.
Inside your dream.